Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the April, I'm sorry, I've lost a month. April 2023 meeting of the Richmond Ions Community Group. My name is Tom Coates, for those who don't know me. I see we have a number of new faces in the room and perhaps online, part of the fan base of our speaker today. And I would invite each and every one of you who has not been here before, we'd love to have you come back. Membership in this organization is the only thing required for membership is just showing up. And but there's a sign up on the table in the back by the door for those who are not on our monthly email list, and those who would like to get a monthly flyer of our meetings. Put your name and your email address on there, and we'd love to have you join us again. For those who are not familiar with IONS itself, it's an organization, stands for Institute of Noetic Sciences. It was commenced in 1973 by Edgar Mitchell. Edgar Mitchell was the lunar landing module pilot for Apollo 14. And he, like several of those people who walked on the moon, because there were not many in those days, had his own takeaway from the experience, which was a unity consciousness experience, which occurred to him on his way back to Earth, as he saw the Earth from space, not far from the moon, as a pale blue dot and so forth. And he resolved at that moment in time to change the course of his life trajectory and dedicate the rest of his life to this exploration of consciousness, especially the interface between science and spirit. He had a PhD, I think, in aeronautical engineering, so he was somewhat of a scientist himself. And this experience of oneness that occurred with him was something that he knew was a spiritual breakthrough, and so he wanted to create a vehicle for that kind of exploration and to share it with others. And IONS was what came out of that. IONS has community groups all over the world, mostly in English-speaking portions of the world, but not exclusively. There are some community groups in South America. There are many across the United States, Europe, Canada, and so forth. And I would say we are, having been in continuous operation since January 1996, we are one of the oldest continuously operating community groups in the whole network, perhaps the oldest. And I can't say that with any certainty because ION Central, unfortunately, doesn't keep records on those things. But the average community group will come and go in a year or two, and then another one will restart a few years later and that sort of thing. And we've been really blessed with the group of supporters we have in this area for our programs. And I would have to say, and today is going to be a great example of it, the programs we have in the Richmond IONS Community Group are without equal anywhere else on the planet in terms of the community group network. And I would say that a lot of our programs are at least as good as the ones that come from the national organization, although they have been really putting on some good ones in the last couple of years since COVID came along, and they had to go to Zoom and so forth. And I invite everyone who is not a member of IONS itself to consider joining. And there are many programs that come on a Friday afternoon from local time 2 to 3, I think, that are on Zoom, and they're mostly free. And I would urge all of you to consider looking into those and supporting the organization, because they're still doing wonderful things, and they have done wonderful things for now. This is the 50th year. This summer will be their 50th anniversary. So let's see what else. We've got the book exchange in the back here for those who are new to that. That's a portion of our stuff that Robert Bushman, who's sitting over here on the second row on my right, started several months ago. So anyone who wants to give away a book or pick up a free book on something of urgent spiritual concern it can do so by coming in here and grabbing whatever's there. You don't have to bring anything with you, but you can if you have books you want to share with others. What is the other thing, Susanna? Oh yeah, our treasurer Sally Youngs for the last 15 or 16 years is resigning, and we are going through a global search for a replacement for her. And the universe we have to search in is quite small, but we would ask that anyone who has an interest in that, in the possibility of being the treasurer for our organization, which is very rewarding spiritually. It doesn't pay very well. In fact, it doesn't pay at all, but it carries many spiritual dividends. When you get to heaven, St. Peter will have all sorts of wonderful things on the chalkboard for you. So we invite anyone who is interested in that to contact either me or Susanna Calvert or who else, Martha Mullen we're all in the steering committee, or go on our website and contact Elizabeth Kuhn. And it really is a vital function. We don't handle much money, but we do. Our programs cost us for rent and other sundry costs about $350 a month to put on, and so it's a vital function for us to have somebody who can keep up with those nickels and dimes that we're taking in to pay what we need to pay. And let's see, one other. Oh, we as we always do, since we don't have dues in this organization, we pass a love offering basket around during each meeting, and we invite those online to. We have a PayPal function on our website. We invite those online to go online and make a donation to us as well. There's no requirement for a donation, but like I said, if we don't have donations, we can't continue because there are costs that we have whether we get donations or not. And so we invite you to reach into your pocket or your wallet, and where your heart meets your wallet, at the deepest point of that, we ask you to let that come together and make the basis for your donation. And what else? We've got. Oh, right. We have another speaker. You're talking about the Wednesday series, right? Yeah. We have another series. There's so many things to announce, I just can't keep up with them all anymore. We have a second speaker series, which is started by the lady to my right here, Susanna Calvert, back in November or so of last year. And this comes on the first Wednesday evening of each month from 7 to 8:30 Eastern Time. And we've had some absolutely wonderful speakers in that so far, including one lady from Australia who was, I think it was in the middle of the night when she was speaking to us from Australia when it was our time at 7 o'clock here. But in any event, it's a wonderful additional series. The focus of that series is spiritual practices as opposed to science and spirit and so forth. But we're doing that in collaboration with an entity that Susanna formed called Sanctuary of Earth. And so we invite everybody on our mailing list will also get a monthly flyer for that, not to be confused with this one, but it's on the first Wednesday of each month, 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. on Zoom only, not in person. Now, the last announcement we have is for a bulletin board. Why don't you come up and explain that, because you explain it better than I.
Hi there. Just a note about the Wednesday speaker series. You probably noticed that the flyer for next month is the same as last month. We had to rearrange the schedule. So, but don't miss that next talk. We have some wonderful presentations from my teacher and friends in Athens, Georgia. The other thing we decided to do is to create a community directory. And so how this will work on the emails, Tom will add a link where you can access a form where you could fill out your contact information and any offerings you might have for the community. So if you offer healing services or classes, or you have a book, you're free to put that into the form, and it'll get automatically posted to a Google Drive spreadsheet. And the link to the spreadsheet will also be in the email. So all you have to do is go into the spreadsheet and you can see other people's addresses and offerings. So we're not marketing anybody. It's just a sort of a crowdsourced directory that's a service to the members of the IONS community. So I hope you'll make use of it and we can stay in touch between sessions.
Thank you, Suzanne. I couldn't have said that if my life depended on it, I'm afraid, because I don't know what any of those terms are. Now we're moving on with the meeting. Carol Louie is going to introduce our speaker for today. And so, Carol, can you come on up and do that?
Good morning. What a great crowd. I am so excited. I get to meet some of the neatest people. And in my interest in biofield viewing, that's how Glenn and I got connected. And so we did an experiment with biofield viewing. I hope he's going to talk about that a little bit. And from there, I found out he also did brain mapping. So I've been wanting to do that at DOPS for a while, and he and I got together for a session about that to see what happens when I channel. So he's very interested in mixing science with metaphysics, and I am also. So besides the biofield viewing, the brain mapping, he does the HRV Biofeedback, Neurofeedback, and this is all part of his psychology practice. And then I also love the fact that he's writing about it. He wrote an article or a chapter, Evolving as a Neurotherapist, Integrating Psychology and Neurofeedback. So it's really helping open doors in the scientific community, and I hope it will open the doors to your mind about all of this as well, to have him join us. So thank you so much, Glenn.
Let's see, probably I should raise this. Is this good? Does that work out? Thank you for the very kind words. And what a lovely group here. It's just a nice thing, friends and people that I've seen around a little bit. And I'm just very, very appreciative of people coming out on a Saturday morning to do this. And this has been on my bucket list to talk about for a while, to be able to talk about the integration of woo-woo and science and how we can kind of practically use some things that we know to kind of better our experience and those of those that we love. I'd like to start with a meditation if we can. So let's everybody just allow your eyes to close if you're comfortable doing that, or soften your eyes and just go inside for a moment and just allow your breath to deepen a little bit. And just allow any tension to relax if you notice any. And you can almost feel the vibe in this room. We have lovely people that are here for all the right reasons, people that want to evolve further and want to be the best that we can be and the most compassionate that we can be. And plug into this field and plug into the broader field. Connect up with God or the universe or the field or however you think about that. Could be a loved one. and give thanks for the luxury that we have to be able to spend this time taking good care of ourselves and generating compassion for others. And finally, take a moment and send compassion to those that are suffering, to the world. And just let that resonate for a moment. And wouldn't it be nice if over the next hour we learned some things that we can put into use to help others? To help others be a little more loving, to be a little more compassionate, to suffer less. And yes, that would be nice. That would be a very nice thing. Take another moment, and when you're ready, return to this room. And we'll begin. Dan, if you can let me know time-wise when we have about 15 or 20 minutes at the end so we can do questions and discussions. That'd be great. I'd appreciate it greatly. And thank you so very much for doing the tech. Great. And is that on me? Yes, please. Yeah, there's no sound or video, so that won't go. Slide to show the right of the animations. There you go. Okay, my contact information is up there, and we can talk afterwards. I'll be around. So let's be humble. We know very little. The world is this is the one of the nicer photos from the Hubble telescoping. This is the pillars of creation. And you think about how long, the longest car drive we've ever been on and how it seemed to take forever. Well, this is 29 trillion miles wide, and it's really far from here. So we are pretty tiny in the scope of everything else. And the world has been in existence for 4.5 billion years. So we're just these little flickers in a really, really, really big place. So there's an awful lot that we don't know. And there's an awful lot that we don't perceive. Yes. I'm sorry? Oh, the Dalai Lama was in there just as my reminder that we just really want to be humble. That there's, you hear a lovely introduction, and it's very easy to really take ourselves too seriously. There's a lot that we don't know, and maybe that was my intention. Let's see, there we go. So we see a very portion of the energy that's around us. We see this little sliver, really tiny, whoops. And there's a much broader field. And we have these energy fields that surround us, and they can be measured with different technologies. Our heart can be measured about 10 feet out. Yeah, I'm having a little trouble with the slideshow. I'm not sure why it's paused. Let's see. It is paused. Let's see. Okay. Okay. How about if I don't know if this the clicker has any bearing on it, but you want to just move the slides and I won't touch that in case that messed it up? Okay. Like I said, we have very little control over a lot of things. Maybe go out and back in again. But okay. You want me to try this, or do you want to click them? Okay. So heart energy can be measured about 10 feet out. If we put a, yes? 10 feet out only to the front, or we measure? I think everywhere, probably, but I don't know. I've heard about 10 feet out. And some of us have been in workshops where people are experimenting with divining rods that kind of expand, and that's kind of a variation of what we're talking about. But we can measure it, reasonably far. If we put a sensor on the head, we can measure it pretty accurately, an EEG sensor. But if we just barely move it off, we can still kind of measure it. With better technology, maybe we can measure it quite a bit further. All right, I'm going to let you change the slides because this doesn't want to cooperate, please. So I want to give thanks to our friend Brian Daly. Brian is he's one of these people that I hope one day I grow up to be, as kind as he is. He's a great guy. He's a physician at a teaching hospital, retired in Rochester, New York, where they train all the interns in learning how to do Reiki, because it makes a phenomenal difference. They do a lot of cancer work, a lot of chemotherapy, and he was at the Monroe Institute doing an energy medicine class, and he was kind enough to share these just incredible images. I'll let you hit that slide. So we have an orange, we have an orange seen through an X-ray, we have an orange seen through a CAT scan, and then in the lower right-hand corner, an orange seen with a MRI. And just seeing the energy, it just reminds us that we're really energy beings. It's a much more complex world than we typically think. New slide, please. So on the left is a leaf, and then on the right, if you crumple up the leaf, then that's the memory of the leaf that was just there. So this is Carillion photography. Again, a reminder that energy can be measured in different ways. And there's different thoughts about how accurate some things are, but there's something there that really makes sense. Next one. So this is a Qigong master, and you can kind of see the various chakras, the energy, the differences in the light, throat chakras. Next slide. And so even people that are not Qigong masters, one of the few benefits of being bald is you can really see my crown chakra very, very nicely. So that's really connected in spirit. That's, and next slide. So it gets wilder from the sense that on the left, I don't know, it kind of looks like a heart to me. It's a heart chakra. It's a shame I didn't get there's one that I've seen that is almost a cross, which is for a very devout woman. But you can see kind of the differences in light patterns as people are sending balls of healing energy out there. And those that do Reiki may notice the Shokurai symbol, which is a power, kind of bring the power here kind of symbol. As differences in the light there. And basically somebody went like this and did, and there's a energetic memory of what just took place. Next slide. This is Brian's wife who had a toothache, and I can't imagine being his wife. Let's pull out the cameras. He So you can see in her jaw the tooth abscess. And then someone did distant Reiki. They were several hundred miles away. And then there's an after slide. And you can see the differences. It's a much lighter, the inflammation is much lighter. But this is my favorite. This just blows me away. So this here is a person standing, this camera was this way, sideways. And you can see kind of an arm there. You can see all the way down, see where the hand is over there in the brighter red? Well, what's fascinating about that is that this is someone who suffering from phantom pain. They don't have an arm below their elbow. So the elbow is gone, and all this red stuff is energy. That's the memory of the of that part of their arm. And so, you know, again, we're energetic beings, and there's a lot of ways to think about this stuff. We can also measure, you know, again, we're trying to measure this energy, and one measurement is EEG. So EEG stands for electroencephalogram, it's brainwaves. And when a bunch of neurons fire together, that makes the EEG. And I'll let you again. And we could talk about EEG in terms of two major variables. One is how fast is the EEG, how many brainwaves per second, and how strong the EEG is, how, in this case, how tall it is. So the top drawing is more powerful energy, but slower, and the bottom one is much faster. So amplitude or power and frequency, waves per second. And we can, next slide, please. So here we have 2 seconds of EEG, and we can count the waves. So from here to here is a second. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's an alpha wave. So that when our brain makes brain waves about 9 times per second, we're making alpha. Alpha is a beautifully chill wave. So when we were first getting started, we were all probably, not me because I was anxious, but most of you were probably pretty chill and making, you know, kind of comfortable alpha waves. And as we get into information that's a little more complicated, our brain speeds up and moves into beta. And I'll let you shift that again, please. We can take the waves and put them in a math crunching machine called fast Fourier transform, and it tells us of that wave, these are the different speeds that compose that wave. And this says, well, most of the power is in this 8-9 hertz speed. Closer to Mike? Okay, sorry. So when I do this, I do clinical work. And in the clinical world, we tend to think of, so we know alpha, we were just talking about that. And slower than alpha is theta, 4 to 7 waves in a second. Slower than theta is delta, about 0.5 hertz to about 3. Faster is beta, 12 to 30. 30 and above is high beta, it includes gamma. In the clinical world, typically slow waves, waves that are too slow or too fast are kind of the enemy. So somebody with obsessive compulsive disorder may make brain waves that are way, way, way too fast. Waves that would be very appropriate if a snake came in here. I'm making very fast waves if that were to happen. Somebody with making that pattern, the problem is they make that pattern without the snake being in the room. So their brain is going to be inefficient. Or somebody with ADD might make these nice, slow, spacey theta waves, which makes it harder to, you know, we would know it at night if we're reading in bed and we go, huh, what did I just read? We have to reread to make sense of it because we're not processing that information. So in the clinical world of difficulties with anxiety or trauma or anxiety, the slower speeds and the speeds that are too fast typically are a problem. They get in the way of functioning. But this is ions. This is a group of woo-woo people or woo-woo interested people. So we get to talk about the strength of those waves. And so kind of 8 to 11 alpha is just kind of being here, being present, but being chill, being mellow, kind of light. We close our eyes for a moment and, we're not thinking about our taxes that are due soon somewhere, maybe, I don't know. But we can go deeper. So if we go into a more theta dominated state, then we begin to connect up with some of the deeper information that's there. We'll talk in more detail, but it's expanded imagination, perhaps it's manifestation, more subconscious, and perhaps delta is connected to source. Perhaps it's where Reiki or healing energy takes place. Perhaps it's the Akashic record, the field of information that's all around us. The faster speeds, again, are logical thinking. And then gamma we'll talk about a little bit later, which is a binding rhythm that's involved in lots of special experiences. And next slide. So we can put if you have a granddaughter that's very cute, you can put a cap on and you can measure instead of just one spot. And you can hit the next slide. So here we have 19 channels measuring all the area, and you can kind of see that on the left, it's kind of small, and this is kind of the front of the head moving to the back of the head. And you can kind of see these are bigger, and this is what somebody who has ADD looks like when they're spacing out. Good focus, space out, and if we continue it, it'll be small again. And if we're trying to get into a meditative state, then we want to intentionally make these slower speeds en route to do the things that we want to do. Next slide. We can measure each of the spots and get the measure of each of the speeds. And next one. But really, it's how much is too much? What's the right amount? It matters a lot clinically. But it can matter if we're trying to use this technology to do other kinds of things. Next slide. I want to show some data in a little bit, and the graphic, and this is the last technical stuff, and I apologize for that part, but these little heads, each of these dots is a sensor, nose, ears, back of the head, and the colors are going to represent whether something is more than average, less than average, a lot more, a lot less. And they're measured in something called Z-scores, or it's a variation of standard deviation, which is, if it's in the yellow, it's more than about 93% of the population. And next slide. So my daughter had a radio show here in town for many years, and she used to have a psychic that would be on her show. Patrick Matthews, lovely guy, and one night he did a thing at a hotel, and I saw him work, and I said, Patrick, it's wonderful. I'd love to do a brain map with you. I'm a psychologist. If you ever would like that, it would be fascinating. And he said, yeah, that'd be great. And so a couple years went by, and then one day he came to the office. He said, bring somebody in to read, and so. I'm sitting in my chair in my scientist practitioner role. He's over here. We have the cap on. We had my daughter and his sister. We had video cameras rolling. And he said, bring your wife in to read. Okay, so my wife is going to be the subject. And he did this. And he's a very, very impressive guy. He's a multi-sensory, I guess, psychic, where he gets information through visions and clairaudience and through feel. He's written a bunch of books. He's been on TV. He's the real deal from my view. And the readings were just, some of the responses were, what's the term? Verifiable information or information you couldn't know any other way. And I know we have a couple folks in here that do this work, and a number of hits we talk about later if we have time or interest. But and next slide. And so the top line is, and we did this eyes closed, and then we did it again eyes open to get validity. I'm just showing the eyes closed because the eyes open is identical. So gray is exactly average. And so for the most part, he makes the same amount of delta, theta, alpha, beta, and high beta relative to the general population when he's not connected in spirit. And then when he is connected in spirit, his brain changes markedly. Now he makes an incredible amount of delta in the front. He makes more alpha in the front, and he makes gamma in the temporals in the back of his head. Statistically, zillion to one, possibility this is due to chance. And it was like, whoa, this is so cool. And so I'm trying to make sense. So I went to wiser colleagues who gave me their idea. And then I was at a conference and I had dinner with kind of one of the leading thinkers in the neurofeedback world. And he said, I showed him the pictures. He said, wow, I said, it's very interesting. Very cautious university professor type. And he said, I don't know, 7 times. And they said, but if I had to guess, he said, I think that what he's doing is he's making that delta is probably where the information is, but he makes enough gamma to keep himself awake and be able to hold it in memory and be able to process it a little bit. And I said, wow, that's great. And I was telling the story to somebody at a conference we were presenting at, and she said, well, I don't know how to do the analysis, but I know of a psychic. I said, well, if you can do it in this way, here's kind of the structure. And she said, yeah, okay, we'll see. And next slide. And okay, so here, her psychic in the beginning, normal amount of delta, was high in theta and alpha. This guy lives more in a subtler, more inward kind of world, a more internal kind of more relaxed, more chill kind of place. But then when this guy goes into state, boom! Look at the delta, just magnifying. And this is more again than 99% of the population. Same thing with theta, alpha in the front, gamma, temporally, and then in the back. And then she came back a couple weeks later. There's another psychic in New York I might have access to, and a little bit different, but the same pattern of increasing the delta, increasing the theta, increasing the gamma. And next slide. So we put them together, we have a pattern. And then I was telling the story to one of my friends that's much wiser and more experienced. He said, oh yeah, we know that. That's exactly what should happen. He's, back in the 80s he learned, but I just thought it was very cool. So next slide. So this is the Monroe Institute, which I think is, I know that you have had lots of involvement there. To me, it's one of the cooler places on the planet. It's the story for those that don't know it is Bob Monroe was a radio business guy who began having these spontaneous out-of-body experiences, was trying to make sense of what this was all about, and went a lot of places, went to the Menninger Clinic to find out if he was okay and what was going on with him. And they say, well, his brain is fine, but yeah, we have seen some other people that have done these kinds of things. So he began traveling more. His wife eventually said, you're traveling too much. Let's just build a place and have people come to us. And that was the origin of the Monroe Clinic, which is, kind of the premier place on the planet to study consciousness. And of all things, it's in Virginia, about an hour and a half from here, which is just wonderful. And next slide. It's a magical place in a lot of ways. So some people think that orbs, these little round things that you can kind of see, it's funny, you can see it better on a smaller picture, are units of consciousness. And I was there with someone one night where you can see them with your naked eye quite well, and she took some photos and made them look pretty. And it's a very cool place. And you do things where they use sound technology to help you go into deeper states. Next slide. So the last time I was there, I met Judith Pennington, and Judith is a really lovely woman who's brilliant, and her lineage is that a guy named Max Cade in England studied the brainwave patterns of psychics and healers and did a lot of exploring and recorded their EEG and came up with these patterns. And Cade's student was Anna Wise, who brought it to the United States, and Judith is Anna Wise's, I guess, lineage child. So at this workshop at the Monroe Institute, you are hooked up, you have a couple of sensors on the back of your head, you're hooked into an EEG machine, and in this setting it was with 3 other people, and 2 other people for the story I'm going to tell you. And so they're monitoring all 3 of our EEGs. And at the same time, sound is being pulsed in at certain frequencies to help get us into these deeper states of consciousness. And so one of the guys that was at the table was a very enlightened guy that has been doing very deep work for a long time, and his patterns were crazily advanced. And we all had this intention before doing this next second. We're all going to connect together, and if we can, let's meet on the astral plane by this, this crystal, and we're going to try to do this together. We held hands before we had the intention, and so then we are now separately in these chairs. We're hooked up, and eye masks on, listen to these pulsed sounds, and I had a very profound experience. I did not see anybody at the crystal. The other 2 people did see me at the crystal. Somebody from a table in another row said, "Glenn, I saw you at the crystal," which really stretches some of it. But the part that's meaningful to me, that's particularly meaningful, apart from the pretty powerful experiences, were that Judith Pennington said, "It's amazing, all of your EEG patterns were in sync for the vast majority. It took a little while, took maybe 5 minutes to sync up, but then you were all in sync, all making this pattern we'll talk about in a minute." I think this one guy dragged me along. The other 2 at the table, both more experienced than I, "Yeah, we saw each other there. We were talking." I'm like, okay. And next one. One more technical thing. So far we've been talking about, so we have the raw wave. It can be converted digitally into this pattern, the height reflecting the amount of power. So you can see alpha in this one is pretty high. And next slide. And now all we're doing is turning it on its side. And imagine now if we had a sensor showing that reflecting our left side activity, and then we put a second sensor on the right side, and then next slide. And now we have a mind mirror. And so this mind mirror is reflecting how much delta we're making on each side, how much theta, how much alpha, low beta moving up through gamma. And this pattern is there's 3 patterns that they talk about in the mind mirror world. One is the awakened mind, and this is, again, kind of lighter meditation, creative problem solving, characterized by that alpha reaching out, which some people think about the alpha theta border being the bridge between conscious and unconscious. That theta being unconscious, and if we can surf that theta, if we can get our brain going from alpha to theta and back to alpha, then we can get a lot of information that has a lot of potential value. In fact, there's a whole neurofeedback approach called alpha theta training, which has been used for a lot of different things, including trauma and severe substance abuse, as well as trying to promote expanded consciousness. So that's the pattern they talk about for the awakened mind. And now this is the evolved mind pattern. It's a little different. It's rounder, and this to me is, I think of it as ego death, ego surrender, unity, we're all in this together, oceanic wellness, that feeling of bliss that we experience at times. Um, so I guess about 6 years ago, they had the last Grateful Dead, supposedly, concert in Chicago. And it was 3 nights of, it's going to be, this is going to be it. And so at the airport, they had, as I'm watching, waiting for my brother to come in, I'm watching people depart from the planes with tie-dye, like these, inhabiting Chicago. It was just a great scene. But when we walked into the stadium, you walk in and you're given a long stem rose. And so 70,000 people have just walked in looking at this rose, looking around at everybody, people feeling something special about this. The field of that experience was so palpable that, so I think of, this non-dualism, that we're not separate dynamic. That to me is the evolved mind. And next one. And then the last one is superconscious mind. So I think when we are really connected to God, really connected to the field, I think this is where out-of-body experiences take place. This is where lucid dreaming takes place. The lucid dreaming, for those that are not familiar, being the experience of dreaming and being aware that you're dreaming. And people can learn how to control that experience and get information and learn some things. I think energy healing may take place there. Perhaps when people are doing Reiki or other kinds of things, maybe we need to connect with that field. I think of energetic healing as being, if I'm able to do it, I'm a smart rain spout, basically. Information is coming in and it's kind of coming out energetically. It's not mine. I didn't create the information. That's either a God sent or universe sent, or but I think of that's the EEG pattern. Tom has spoken about soul assisting. I think that's probably in that domain as well. Changing of the past. So I think it's an interesting, maybe that's the electrical energetic pattern of that state. You can kind of see there's some differences. Alpha is present in all of them to varying degrees. The amount of gamma, different changes. There's more gamma in the superconscious mind. Delta changes a little bit, but so in the Monroe world, they talk about focus levels. And so focus level being another name for a different state of consciousness. So kind of C1 is ordinary consciousness in that framework. Focus 10, mind awake, body asleep. Kind of what we started to begin to do with our opening meditation. What we do at home if we're trying to relax and be present and either begin prayer or begin to enter a meditative state. 12 is a state of deeper expansion. Now, some people argue whether these are discrete states or this is a continuum. 15 for me is different when I meditate. 15 is a state of no time, they define it as. It feels much more expansive. Imagery is much greater. It feels like time is not a variable for me when I'm doing that. And 21 is kind of the very edge of perception of the time-space continuum. It's really, the mind is very conscious, very active, and yet we're experiencing things differently. And Monroe's system has some other states that are a little bit different, but it's just a framework to think about some of this. And so let's see. So I think what's covered on this particular screen is something about the field. And just to define a couple terms, so I think that we live in an energetic universe. We're all beings of energy. That the biggest category is the field. A nice name for the field is God. I like the concept of God. Some people prefer, consciousness itself. Maybe consciousness can also be defined as the awareness of the field or aspects of the field. Some people think that consciousness is primary. Some people feel that information is primary. Some people feel that information or data, or digital information, is what we form things, us, thoughts from with our attention, and that's conscious. So different subtleties in how people think about it. So the book on the left is by a guy named Tom Campbell, and Tom was the young physicist that was hired by Bob Monroe to try to figure out what's going on with these out-of-body experiences. Classically trained physicists, anesthetized, and they did all kinds of ways to try to measure what is going on here. And he has a his intention. He wrote a series of books called My Big Toe. It's Toe is my theory of everything, trying to integrate Einstein theory of relativity with quantum mechanics to kind of combine them in a way that makes sense. And my simple way of understanding it, well, I'll wait and tell you the blueberry story in a minute. We took a week with Tom at Monroe, and my simple way of understanding it is that our attention highlights, kind of makes things happen, and that and that his metaphor for consciousness is basically a computer model. It's all zeros and ones ultimately, and we make choices, and we're trying to help the system be more stable, more loving. Our mission on Earth is to grow up and be more loving and be more, connected to others. The field, by the way, has a much more readable, understandable discussion about that. I asked Tom, we were talking at this work, I was talking to people we're understanding over a few days, and Tom is sitting up on this stage, and there's, I guess, 20 of us here at this week-long workshop, and so I was calling my theory the blueberry theory. I was talking to people casually, and then he's up there and he goes, before we start with questions, I understand there's this blueberry theory of yours, Glenn. Please tell me okay. The video cameras are on this thing. I said, well, thanks a lot, guys, for putting me in the spotlight. And I said that my understanding is we live this life, based on what you're saying, we live this life here on Earth, and then we all go, imagine that we're blueberries, units of energy with a semi-permeable outer layer, and that my energy gets to interact with you and each of you, and your energy gets to interact with me, and new information comes into my kind of discrete unit. And that I said at the end of this existence, it's kind of like the blueberries are on a conveyor belt. They go to the end, there's a blueberry squasher. All the blueberry juice goes into the common pool of consciousness, so to speak. And then there's a little spigot at the end, and a drop gets dropped to form the new blueberry. And now I'm getting ready to go on the next adventure, and there's options for how to go. And and then he's up there thinking about it, and he says, and I said, and that we get some choices as to which direction we want to go in the next life, right? And he says, I'm with you all the way until the choices, because it wouldn't be efficient for the system to be able to have all the memories of your 1,000 wives and 1,000,000 breakfasts. And so maybe some aspects get held in the next permutation of life. But he said, but the rest holds pretty good. I said, all right, this is good. So it's a big field out there. There's a lot of ideas. I think our mission is to kind of perfect our energy. I think that's why we're here to learn, in his words, to grow up. Next. One more thing here. Other words that go with this are chi being another term for energy, or ki. Ruach is a Jewish term. Prana is an Indian term. Pneuma, I think, is a Greek term for this life energy that we all, exchange. And next one. Before I get practical, let's let everybody take another moment and close your eyes again, or let your eyes get soft, or however you'd like to do it. And settle. Just allow your breathing to deepen and notice it. And wouldn't it be nice if you could easily get into a state of expanded awareness that supports getting helpful information? A state that could help us become more loving. Perhaps having expanded skills like energetic healing. And take a moment and ponder why that would be helpful for you. What would be useful about it for you if you could do that a little bit better? Do you believe that other people can do this? Do you believe that everyone has the potential to do this? Take a moment and connect with the field, or guides, or your higher self, and see if you can identify any blocks that hold you back from developing these skills. And notice any solutions that are emerging. And I don't know if those solutions will be surprising or just fun. And wouldn't it be nice if you left this workshop with a couple of things you could do that would be an upgrade in your meditation skills? And feel how good that would feel. And when you're ready, re-alert, find yourself back here. So there's a lot of cool tools out there. There's things we can do to make meditation easier. On the left is a device from the Heart Math Company called the Inner Balance. It's a heart rate variability device. It plugs into your iPhone, and it gives you, there's a clip that goes on the ear, and it gives you feedback about whether you're making a pattern of good heart rate variability, which we'll talk about in a little more detail later. The Muse is a home neurofeedback device, which helps people kind of get guided into a state of meditation. It kind of slips on, it measures the electrical activity in the front of your brain and then off your ears. I'll wait on I'll wait on the next two, actually. I do want to mention the Expand app from the Monroe Institute. They have a number of CDs that they've developed over the years that are really beautifully, incredibly designed to get people into deeper states. What they do particularly well is that they field test stuff because people are up there for these retreats. The Expand app has some free things. There's a paid version that has a lot of things in there. And it's just a nice thing. And I eat my own cooking. That's my dad with a V-Light, which is a device that pulses in either alpha or gamma waves of light. It's my dad was concerned that this is at age 90, by the way. He was concerned that he might have early Alzheimer's. And I said, Dad, there's nothing early. And besides, you were counting cards at a casino last month. So I don't think that's the case. But he said, but I forget people's names. I said, okay. But anyway, so for a number of years, we had done the V-Light with him. I think it's a great device for brain health. My granddaughter's playing a game using her EEG to develop better focus. And next slide. So we can influence the brain in different ways. We can influence the brain through medications. We can influence the brain by entrainment. And entrainment is the idea that if we provide a feedback pulse at a certain frequency, the brain will follow that pulse. We can do it with sound, like we've been talking a little bit. So we can do it with light. We can do it with electromagnetic energy. We can do it with alternating current. We can also influence the brain by neurofeedback, which we're going to talk about, and through other forms of biofeedback like heart rate variability. And we can do it by meditation. So meditation is wonderful. It's just a wonderful thing to do. And for a lot of people, it's hard. I was at a workshop once where the guy was great. He said, his family therapist, big group, and he said, all right, how many people here have ever meditated? Therapists, everybody's raising their hand. How many people in the group have meditated for 1 minute this month? And, a little bit more, and so, but we all think that we ought to be doing it more often, deeper, more regularly, because it can be hard. There's different styles of meditation. So Vipassana meditation or mindfulness meditation, focusing on the breath, focusing on a candle flame, focusing on what's arising in the moment. Mantra meditation, we're focusing on a sound. It's the original transcendental meditation, TM. My favorite is loving kindness meditation. If you haven't done loving kindness meditation, I highly recommend it. Look it up online. The phrases essentially are, may I be filled with loving kindness. May I be healthy in body, mind, and spirit. May I be safe from inner and outer harm. And may I be at peace and at ease. May my wife Sandy be filled with loving kindness. May she be, and my son and daughter and grandkids and neighbors and patients, and may all ending with, may everyone be filled with loving kindness. May everyone be healthy in body, mind, and spirits. And it really sets, I think, a wonderful tone for the day. Essentially, everybody you then meet throughout the day, you have already blessed. I think it's a very lovely way to work. And guided imagery is great is easier. I think those are kind of in maybe order of ease to do. The Dalai Lama has done some, they have these meetings with neuroscientists, and they publish the findings, and the Mind's Own Physician has a lot of the, I think it was the last time that they did that with Richie Davidson and the folks that are really looking at EEG and fMRIs and what's really going on with this. So, but again, meditation, it can be a challenge. So entrainment, if we pulse in 100 beats per second in the left ear and 110 in the right ear, our brain has to make sense out of the two fields colliding, and they kind of accommodate each other with equal power. And the brain kind of subtracts the difference. So if we pulse in 100 on one side, 104 on the other side, the brain moves into a pattern of 4 hertz, which is theta, that nice, deeper relaxation. I've used Super Sleep, which is one of the Monroe CDs for patients for a long time now for sleep issues, and it pulses you really deep. It sounds kind of like white noise, kind of, but the pulsing gets you to sleep. The next drawing with this white band is a device called the Neorhythm, which pulses in electromagnetic frequency, and there's different protocols or speeds for kind of calmness, for pain relief, for sleep, for activation. Again, it's the speed of the pulsing that influences the state of consciousness. It can be done with light. The David Paradise has goggles, has headphones, has goggles, or you could have electricity pulsing as well. Again, all in a way to entrain the brain multisensorily to get us into a pattern. So neurofeedback is EEG biofeedback. So in the office, it could look like this. So she has 4 sensors that are measuring her EEG. And when she does a good job making the pattern that we're trying to get her to make, new planets appear on the screen. And if she can continue to do that, a new solar system. And if she can't do it for a while, the planets begin to fly away. And next slide. Or we can have a display where keep the green ship ahead of the purple and the yellow. The green ship is reflecting theta. The purple ship is reflecting theta. The green ship is reflecting kind of a calm focus wave, low beta. And the yellow ship is reflecting overly fast beta. So it's saying you'll succeed at this game when you're making a pattern where you're focused, not too anxious, and not too sleepy. And so if, and again, we figure out what people need. There's kind of a diagnostic process to figure out what we think people need, where they're inefficient in a clinical setting, in a expanded consciousness setting like this. But we know some things about what would be good for expanded consciousness. So learning to make more alpha is good. Learning how to make more theta is good. And next slide. And the mind mirror lets you do that all at once. They're saying, okay, you want to make the awakened mind pattern? Let's set it up. And when you have approximated this pattern, you'll hear a little beep, or music can go off and on. So, okay, you're back in that state, beep. You're back in that state, beep. Silence, no beeps. And we can make awakened mind or evolved mind or whatever we want to do. So we can use this technology to train our brain to make these patterns, which we think have some value for expanded states. Home versions, as I mentioned, the Muse is good for making alpha. Proprietaries are hard to know. The Versus in the middle, you can program it for whatever you want. There's a device called MindLift where you can program the Muse to do things. And there's newer ones that you run off your phone now. The technology has gotten better and better. And we're kind of just at the verge of being able to do lots of things very easily. This is my friend, Jeff Tarrant, who has a Neuromeditation Institute. And what Jeff's a cool guy. He's done a lot of reverse engineering of people in different states. So he will record somebody's EEG while they're tripping on LSD or ayahuasca or some exotic spiritual ceremony to figure out what is their brain doing when they're having these experiences. And then using kind of a combination of neurofeedback and some other things to train those states. Very interesting. He's written a book called Meditation Interventions to Rewire the Brain. But I just heard he's got a new book coming out, which I keep bumping into his thinking at different times. And the title of this talk was something like Developing Our Meditation and Psychic Skills Through Neuromodulation. The title of his book is something like that. It's like, the universe is verifying. But and next one. So the placebo effect, I think, gets a bad rap, because I think that we think that the word placebo means, well, it doesn't do anything. It's fake. It's snake oil. It's not, it doesn't have any substance. And in a, from a simple materialistic worldview, that makes sense. And if we think more complexly about intention, I think everything changes. So if we live in a digital consciousness construction field where we have intention that certain things go certain ways, perhaps our energy and our thoughts can help make that happen. Intentions really seem to make a big difference. So Joe Dispenza wrote a book called You Are the Placebo, and he gets into this. They get into, and Braden gets into it about how our intentions really ultimately can influence cell behavior, and that cell behavioral changes in cell membranes really change the biology of matter. Now, I'm a big fan. Probably the most powerful book that I've read in the last decade is The Ask and It Is Given, and it's Esther Hicks, which is somebody who has channeled a higher being named Abraham for information, and all the books are good, but I like this one in particular because it's the most practical book that I know. It has a lot of techniques that are very, very good. And their perspective would be, if I intend it and I feel the feeling as if it already happened and can really feel it, then it gets manifested. Now, I can't intend to grow hair right now and have a nice long ponytail. I can't do that because I don't really believe it enough. But if I did, I think it could happen. And I'm going to put a pause on that for a minute. I want to talk about Dean Radin. So Dean Radin is, I don't forget, he's part of the National Ions Group. I don't know if he's head of research, but he's a researcher, a woo-woo's researcher's researcher. He's written a number of good books. I like Real Magic a lot. And one of the experiments in there that he cites is the chocolate experiment. So you get a large group of people, you have everybody keep a mood log. And they do this over a number of weeks. How happy are they, whatever. And then they bring everybody in and they have everybody measured. They randomly divide them into two groups. And then they give everybody a piece of chocolate. And one of the groups is told, this is chocolate blessed by very holy Tibetan monks. It will make you happier, down to your cells. And people continue to keep the mood logs. And sure enough, when they do the follow-up, the group that has had the blessed chocolate, supposedly blessed, not blessed, they're much happier. That kind of makes sense with how we think about things. Now, what's the mechanism for why that is? Perhaps the mechanism is intention and believing it, and maybe that's what manifests it. But experiment number 2, they get a new bunch of people, and they have them doing mood logs, and then they give everybody chocolate again. But one of the groups has had chocolate that has been blessed by Tibetan monks. But nobody knows that. And they just think they're eating chocolate. Well, the group that has the secretly blessed chocolate, they're much happier than the other group. So something is going on there. Isn't that interesting? So does the intention of the monks impact physical reality? Well, in an energetic universe, why not? So there's a bunch of things like that. There's a Reiki, I'm not sure if it's in there or in Shimoni John's book, where they have people, it's not good for rats, but if they take mice, it's not a good rat story. They take mice, none of the animal studies are good starting off, but anyway, they take a group of mice, they give them all cancer, and they have people, treat them by putting their hands up against the glass, pane for healing, and the Reiki treated mice do better than baseline. Okay, they repeat it again. This time they have people that don't know anything about Reiki put their hands on the glass at the same spot and the same configuration for the same amount of time, and their rats don't get better the way the Reiki influence rats are. Something's going on there with that. Next, before I leave that, I took that picture. I was taking a class in neurostimulation at Harvard, and that's from the library. They let me sneak in. First, they weren't going to let me in. They said, "No, you're not a student. You can't get in there." I said, "Oh man, I've been so bad. I wanted to feel the vibe of Harvard." And the guard, who is bigger than me, he looks to the left. He looks like, "Quick, come on here." He waits me in there, and so I'm sitting there going, "Wow, this is where presidents have been back when presidents were really, something." This is where the finest thinkers, in the world that's ever been, and the vibe there was palpable. The Harvard reminder was for me that there is a guy, Irving Kirsch, who got in a lot of trouble because he made the statement that Prozac and SSRI antidepressant medication is only 18% better than placebo. And he got attacked by drug companies big time. How could they say such a thing? And this is terrible. And so he used the Freedom of Information Act to request all the studies that have ever been done on those meds, because to get a medication through the FDA, it just needs to pass 2 studies. You can do 10 studies to get the 2, but those 8 get thrown out. So he did it, and he was on 60 Minutes saying, "I wasn't trying to, create any trouble." But anyway, he ended up at Harvard at their, they have like a center for placebo research, because placebos are really, really powerful. There's data that says if you give somebody a blue pill, and that's going to make them more relaxed, well, compared to others, it's, so what you tell people, a red pill can make you more energetic. Inflammation can go up and down. There's, a variety of things with that. And I think we're going to be learning more and more about that as time goes on. They have a big center, and they're studying things. What do we got here? Okay, yeah, thank you. So I'm not sure how this works. Maybe we entrain to the field. So when we were at the last Grateful Dead show in Chicago, I decided the definition between a good concert and a great concert is a good concert. Everybody, all the audience members, are really connected to the source of the music. At a great concert, everybody's connected to the source of the music and each other. And it's that field effect. I think if we plug in, the more we can plug into that, or parts of that field, because there's parts of the field that aren't doing good things. But I think as we can plug into it, I think that's how it works. And I think we do it through intention, and we do it through frequency coherence. So by that is, can I make the pattern of that aspect of the field, either with my brain or with my heart? And I think when you tend to make it with your heart, you make it with your brain as well. Yeah, I think energetic healing works that way. I think that's how Reiki works. Again, being a smart water spout. There's as I've been playing with Reiki a little bit in the office, I was working with someone that had what's called POTS, which is post orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. It's a heart dysregulation problem where people get up and they can barely, they lose balance, they struggle. And so as I'm trying to learn about Reiki, I said, well, let's try to add energy to the heart area. Let's travel up the vagus nerve. Let's try to add energy and positive outcomes for the parts of the brain that are involved with managing those kinds of issues. It made sense to me, and I believed it. And maybe that's all that really mattered. And I met somebody who we were talking about. She was a Reiki master, and she was saying that she does it very similar. I said, really? She says, what I do is it turns out she's a molecular biologist who she says, what I do is I do molecular Reiki. I research whatever condition I'm trying to work. I want to know the gene expression aspects of it. I want to know all the biochemistry, and that's what I'm focusing my intention and healing efforts on, and doing it, a lot more specific. So I don't know how complex we need to be in our efforts to influence people. Tom Campbell's notion would be that we create the tools that are as complex as we want them and need them to be. If we don't need very complex tools, then we don't need to have very complex tools. And let's see, next slide. So the psychedelic literature tells us that set and setting really makes a difference. So I want to encourage everybody to have somewhere where they're going to do their thing. And it doesn't have to be a beautiful Buddha like this, or a beautiful, so those are items that I know the guy that made that tie-dye. I know who meditated in front of that Buddha. There's a lot of energy in there, and boom, it's easy to get into the state with there. But it can be as simple as, this is the part of the couch that I use when I'm going to do my thing, and I'm going to put a blanket over the rest of the thing to give myself a little space, and this is my candle, or this is my item. It doesn't have to be complicated. It's more the intention to have a sacred space that we use. Insight Timer is a nice way to help create space. That's a phone app that has beautiful gongs. That seems that every time I take a yoga class with a new person, they have they use that for their gongs. The idea of creating a time space for beginning and end for your practice is helpful. Next slide. Having a morning routine, I think, really helps. And whether it's if you're a coffee drinker, noticing the flavor of the coffee, let it roll on your tongue, being grateful for the guy who delivered the beans to you, to the guy who delivered the beans to the store, going all the way back to the guy who planted the beans and found me to carry the beans down the mountain, to the guy. A lot went into getting that cup of coffee to us. There's a guy that wrote a book called, I think, 10,000 Thank Yous, that talks about his process of gratitude with that. It was a nice little book. I've been playing lately with a meditation called Liquid Luck by a guy named Joe Gallenberger. And so you have your beverage and you're thinking about, and you're thinking, how important is it to be compassionate? Really important to be compassionate. Really, really. Let's add some compassion. Let's add serendipity and awareness of things that are subtle. Let's add that in. And then ultimately, let's add luck. And again, we want to have this intention. So I think having a morning routine is just a wonderful way to start the day. the most powerful manifestation thing that I know of for me is this "wouldn't it be nice if" technique. And so I think they call it positive aspects, and I think I changed it somehow in that book, or book of positive aspects. And so you're kind of creating intentions and rehearsing as if it were to happen. So wouldn't it be nice if we had just the right number of people coming to this talk this morning that were all really nice people, as I'm saying to myself this morning after I had written it. Yeah, that would be nice. Be very nice. It is very, very nice. Wouldn't it be nice if the tech worked out and that it was smooth? That would be nice. It is nice. Wouldn't it be nice if people got some good information they could use that would be helpful to them? That would be very, very nice. So you're putting out what you want. You're checking to see, well, would that be nice? Well, yeah, that would definitely be nice. And I think energetically it increases the odds of it happening greatly. It's wonderful looking back over last year's "wouldn't it be nice if" things. I just think it's a very powerful technique. Next slide. Journaling is great. Insight journaling is wonderful to get increased awareness of things. I do what I call alpha theta journaling, which is I meditate often with a device, could be pulsing in sounds or electromagnetic energy, and then asking for information that would be helpful for particular things. And stuff pops in, and then I journal about it and process it, and I figure out what it is that, what the meaning is, and then, okay, I close it, and then I go back in again. And it's that process, I think, that has a lot of power to solve problems and to think of other. I do a lot of that with patients that I'm seeing where I feel stuck. I'm not sure what to do. You come up with things that I wouldn't normally come up with. One more. A guy that is great, someone gave me a book called Why Woo Woo Works, which I thought was such a great gift. Even if the book had nothing in it, having it, looking at it was just great. But it turns out it's pretty good. The guy is I think a chemistry professor at the University of Texas. And in there was a quote, a brief review of the study where they had trauma patients write for 20 minutes for 4 days. And they did blood work before and after, and they had better T cell, which I guess is involved in the healing inflammation process, and other biomarkers 6 weeks after the study relative to people that didn't do the writing in a matched group. That's a lot for such a minimal intervention. Let me mention the Shamani Jain book, relatively recent, nice review of the latest. It's a nice collection of of Biofield therapies that's more recent than some of the other things. I like Joe Dispenza's stuff. Let's go ahead. We got talk for maybe a couple more minutes. Let's see what else we got. I like for people to do self-Reiki. So there's a whole world of psychoimmunology where getting people to visualize, this is the Norman Cousins stuff originally, where they're visualizing, perhaps guys with swords fighting off the cancer cells that are inside them. And some data says this makes a difference. I like to think about chakra clearing, this kind of swirling of chakras, chakra energy, kind of brushing off some of the things that are getting us stuck. I like visualizing whatever is not working well in a healthier way, that the systems are working smooth, that old blood cells are being disposed of properly, that kind of thing. Go next. Heart rate variability, just looking at time. So heart rate variability, somebody says that my heart rate is 70 beats per minute. That's true on average, but when we breathe in, our heart rate goes up, let's say 80 or 90. And when we exhale, it goes down, let's say 60 or 50. We breathe in again, it goes back up again to 90, down again to 70. And the difference between our high and low points is called heart rate variability. And you would say, why does that matter? Well, when we breathe in, we are triggering or activating our sympathetic nervous system, our fight-flight part of our autonomic nervous system. When we're exhaling, we are triggering or activating our parasympathetic part of our nervous system, our rest-digest part. And we want those to be in balance. Healthy individuals have high heart rate variability. Individuals that are less healthy don't. Olympic athletes, big swings. People that are really suffering with lots of stress. And here's a sign that sees the inconsistency of what frustration looks like and versus gratitude, a nice smooth sinusoidal kind of pattern. What's nice about it is that it's an easy clip-on phone device. You can learn how to do in 15 minutes. They're inexpensive. Someone told me about a project they did where they had a corporation do this and had people do this for 5 to 10 minutes a day. And there was differences between the groups that did it versus not do it on the money spent on the healthcare costs for the organization. So it's a nice tool. Then I remember hearing a story of someone that was training stock traders to do this. Why? So that in the midst of all the craziness of the stock bit, they can be leveled. Is there anything else? Let me just see what's next. I want to stop for questions and discussion. There's a lot of research that says that heart rate variability training is good for reduction of depression and trauma symptoms and anxiety and better sleep, better asthma, a lot of things. And I think that's plenty for right now. Questions, let's do questions and discussion. Thank you.
So, yeah, whoever has questions online, please raise your electronic hand so I can see you. And we have a question in the room.
They say music tames the savage beast. What is the role of music? Classical music, beautiful music.
I don't know. I think it's all frequency. And I think perhaps some of the classical composers have figured out patterns that are really optimal. I don't know, but that would certainly make sense.
So I'm wondering if you know, I have two questions. One is, what pattern is formed when people are using theratappers?
Yeah, so I have a therotapper.
Yeah.
Therotapper is a device that you can kind of hold on to, and it's like a vibration that can go left. You can have one in each hand, and you can get a pattern with that. I think of it being like everything else in terms of entrainment. I think that it's the speed of the tapping that would make. So if you tap it really, now there's some limit to, I think, our ability to perceive the subtleties at some point. But probably that's a reasonable thing to do.
I don't know if you had any measurements. Second question, for people who have generalized anxiety and ADHD profile, would you recommend the heart rate variability training or the mind lift, or is there another device that you recommend?
Yeah. So I like all of them. One quick sorting is somebody, do they have more over arousal symptoms like anxiety and can't slow down, versus under arousal, which is more sluggish, more kind of classical kind of ADD without hyperactivity kind of thing. I think the heart rate variability does a nice job on the over arousal. And I think again, if we're talking specifically about brainwave dysregulation, or ADD related to a primary brainwave dysregulation pattern of kind of a sleepy, sluggish brain rather than not tuning in due to anxiety, the neurofeedback, I think, does well with the underarousal in a way that the other approaches don't do as well. A number of things work with overarousal, but with the underarousal, I think neurofeedback has a lot of strength.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I thought it was interesting. A number of years ago, I worked at Medical College of Virginia, the computer department, and we were using the computer for different experiments. And one of them was for hyperactive kids, nurses who had to take care of these. And what they did is they hooked these kids up to machines, like I guess like you were showing, to teach the kids to think alpha. And when the nurses are watching the kids and they got hyperactive running around, the nurse would say, "Johnny, think alpha." And Johnny would think alpha and calm down. But anyway, very good application.
It's a great application. Yeah, if you get the feedback initially, whether you're making the state or not, then it becomes a lot easier then to make the state later when you're not hooked up to the equipment. That's the whole hope with the biofeedback. Yeah. So you were raising your hand. I don't know if you still.
I was just curious about the slide that you had of the person who was standing on the side and with the MRI and had part of his arm amputated.
Right, phantom limb.
Pardon?
Phantom limb.
Yes,
pain.
phantom limb.
Yeah,
and I was just wondering. I mean, I've heard that people still think that it's still there, even though it's not. I mean, they can feel it, but
Right.
it's not there.
Right.
So is that basically just in their thought, still in their thought pattern?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it wasn't those were not MRI slides. Those were Biofield imaging slides, a little bit different. And let's start with we don't know. Okay. So you could argue that there are brain patterns that are correlated greatly with various things. So we can think of, our classical trauma person who, when she smells a certain cologne, has a full body and mind trauma experience because it was the cologne that the person that abused her had on at the time, even though there's not all those other things. So how does that happen? Well, one part of the brain is accessing some of the memory networks.
Memory.
Yeah. And then we get into the other more woo-woo explanation, which is if we're able to measure this energy in a spot that's not there, can that energy not have an effect upon our current consciousness and experience of it? And that's, I think that's a fascinating concept. Yeah.
So then the longer time elapses, days, weeks, months, years, it kind of fades from memory, and so that you don't
Well, in the case of,
you don't feel that anymore.
yeah, I don't know a lot about phantom limb pain, so I don't know. I know minimal. I just thought it was a cool slide, but
I don't want to put you on the spot.
no, it's all good. I started out saying all that I don't know, so I can say whatever I want. But we do know that with psychological or physical trauma, it's a different story. The passage of time doesn't always resolve it. In fact, it often typically doesn't with trauma. Folks, there's a network, a brain network of activity that gets activated very easily by normal things in the world, and that until that network of memories, either the brain can be better regulated or with some other ways. And typically for some, it really requires some either brain training or somatosensory kind of work to get there. That those thinking patterns repeat regularly well after the trauma.
So the more severe the trauma, the more they'll probably feel it, or
Perhaps
have it linger, perhaps.
but everybody's different. Yeah.
Hi, I used to work in physical rehabilitation, and when we would have an amputee who had phantom pain, the standard treatment, this didn't always work, but if you put a mirror and the person could see, then do stuff like, say, if the right arm was missing and there was phantom pain, you put a mirror there and it creates this illusion that there are still two limbs. And after a certain period of time, maybe 5 or 6 sessions, the pain would be diminished. Yeah, so you have to convince the brain that the body is still there. Yeah.
Great.
Another perspective. Go back to the picture that you had of the field of what exists, and the fact that we're paying attention only to this little bit.
Right.
Just because you forget about it doesn't mean it's gone. The energy field itself literally has a memory. It's not just the brain.
Right.
So it still exists. In doing Rolfing structural integration, we work on the part that's not there anymore as if it was, because then the entire structure balances more fully.
Right. Makes sense.
Anybody online have any questions?
Hi, Glenn. I'm Anya. I'm curious about in your studies, I think at some point you said you had multiple subjects in there, like was it the meditation person you brought in and invited his family?
Are you talking about the example I gave was being 3 of us doing a meditation at the same time, all hooked up to the same machine? Is that what you're mentioning?
I'm wondering more if you did 2 subjects or more at the same time, and then looking at their energy fields, whether they were similar to one another because they were familiar with one another. Yeah. Did the energies merge?
Yeah, so I have not done that with people myself. The people that I know that have done that, they do, some people do couples therapy where they're hooked up to heart rate variability monitors, and people can have their patterns get more coherent. People have also done that with EEG, and people can be trained or rewarded to make a more similar pattern. And some of it is the biofeedback, and some of it is likely due to the experience and the intention of that kind of experience. If you're my spouse and we have the intention of being in a similar state together, there's more than just the EEG that is a great question. Yeah.
In that same regard, I'm wondering too, when you do the biofeedback, if you can see, even when they are not related to one another, but when they are getting familiar with each other at that moment, how does their imagery change? Yeah. Have you ever attempted that?
I don't know, but it would be fascinating. Yeah.
I'll volunteer.
Yeah.
So we have a question in the chat. For successful manifestation, do you need to be in a certain state like alpha or theta?
I don't know. I think it's easier for me to visualize it with less distraction. I think the deeper states make it easier, but I have no way of knowing. There's no good measures or way to think about that for me? It's a great question.
Okay, someone had their hand up, but then they put it down, so I'm not sure who that was. Okay, that was the chat question. Okay.
Yes, I have a granddaughter who's 19 who's been profoundly depressed since COVID and has been treated. She attempted suicide. She's being treated by a doctor at UVA who's tried everything and not found anything that worked. But she recently started, just last week, a 6-week course of daily magnetic stimulation, TM something or other.
RTMS, yeah.
Yes. Do you know anything about that? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, so RTMS, or repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation, is, so think of the old-fashioned dental x-ray machine, the big cone that kind of zeroes in where you're holding your white plate thing. So it kind of looks like that. You're in a chair like that. And what this is doing is pulsing in electromagnetic energy, typically at 10 beats per second, alpha. Typically, almost all the work is done at this left prefrontal cortex, with the idea that, let me say it differently, they have established some data that says if you do a course of that over a period, it was basically research for folks that were treatment-resistant depression that have failed on at least 2 antidepressants. And the pattern is you do it 4 to 5 days a week for about 20 to 30 sessions, somewhere in there. And you're trying to activate a part of the brain and get better regulation at a part that's pretty involved with depression. And so that's the theory behind it. And for some people, highly helpful. For some people, a little bit less helpful. For some people, highly helpful, but doesn't necessarily stay highly helpful. So I think it's like the psychedelic literature. There's this tremendous interest right now in psychedelics, and I think much like the psychedelic experience, that unless you're doing some follow-up therapy, it's hard to maintain the newer state. And so it's a combination of things, not a standalone, as I would see it.
So that's the important part of the follow-up.
I think so.
Is there anything that you talked about today that, oh, sorry. Is there anything you've talked about? Is there anything you've talked about today that you would think would be a logical follow-up to, in addition to the therapy?
Yeah, so she needs a good therapist. And again, everybody has a brain that's unique and a nervous system that's unique. So it becomes a matter of figuring out where does she get stuck. And there's a lot of good tools out there for it. But
that's good to know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Cynthia wanted you to remind us of all the biofeedback. There was a lot of biofeedback devices, so maybe she could watch the video again. It's on YouTube. Yeah, okay, that'll be on YouTube. Looks like Tom. All right, Suzanne.
Something to be grateful for. Not that long ago, lobotomies were the latest in scientific treatment.
I had a great aunt who was treated with one of those. She was really a happy camper after that lobotomy. On the back on the arm situation, which I thought was wonderful, to me it shows that energetically the arm is still there,
right?
And it suggests to me that salamanders, if they lose a limb, can grow it back. because they don't know they can't, right?
Mm.
And so
Right.
if we can just open up ourselves with some sort of biofeedback to know that we can grow the arm back, the energy is there waiting for it and permitting it to happen without interference from our brain. So
I'm okay with that.
No, I just want to say to your point, there is a nurse practitioner in Richmond who does ketamine therapy, and she's very clinically sound, clinically sourced. Her name is Ashley Manel, and her practice is called Nourish, and she's in the office suite with me downstairs from Tom in the Markel building. So anyway, if people are interested in that ketamine therapy, and she does the follow-up too. You probably know her. I don't know if you know. You don't know her? Okay. All right. Anyway, she's good. There you go.
Yeah, ketamine is interesting in a sense that apparently there's different ways to do it. Some people do. Ketamine has a byproduct of having a very altered state of consciousness, which in some settings the treating physician apologizes for having people in that state. And in other settings, it's the desired state. And it ranges from pure kind of white coat, let me get you set up, we're going to let you roll, we'll be back in 45 minutes, to having someone that's going to sit with you and is available to help process as things come up, to someone who's even more skilled experience, who's going to guide you through, that knows you well, that's going to guide you through working through some of the trauma. So there's a lot of ways to do it, and we're really still in the Wild West, I think, of figuring out what's optimal treatment, but the potential, I think, is great. And my biggest concern about psychedelics is there's some risk factor, not from a medical standpoint, more from a psychological standpoint. But the bigger concern is people have these powerful experiences and they don't know how to integrate it in. And so 3 months later, they're kind of back to baseline and yet feeling the loss for what they had. But I think the potential is just great. Thank you.
right.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
glad that was wonderful. And another example of how blessed this group has been through the years. Thank you so much. It was really, really great. Next month, we're going to have Robert Bushman. Where's Robert? Oh, here he is, right over here. He's going to tell us everything about God that we don't know yet, and so the title of his talk is "Who is God?" And Robert has presented a couple of times, and those of us who were there all know that Robert's presentations are always among the best we have. So we look forward to that next month, and then the month after that, we've got Melissa Gates Perry, who's a channel up in Vermont, who's going to talk about a book she's written called Being Humans. It's a really wonderful book. I've read it. In July, we have a fellow from Seattle named Howard Beatty, who is going to be talking to us about his book called The ETs Speak. That ought to be engaging for all of us. And in August, we're going to have an author of one of the most classic spiritual guides of all time, in my opinion, a woman named Elia Wise, who lives in Novato, California, who wrote a book called Letter to Earth back in 1998. And she, I don't know, she's going to, I'm sure, bring some of that into it, but she also is now getting ready to she spent the last 15 years, she said, working on a play that is going to start off Broadway sometime next January, February, and maybe it will become the Hamilton of spiritual awakening. Who knows? But anyway, we've got a great lineup coming up in the next few months. We'll have the Spring Fling, by the way, as usual. This year will be on the 17th of June at my house, and everyone's invited. And so And now we have our potluck lunch, so enjoy, and thank you for coming. And those who have not been here before and would like to come back and get our newsletter, go ahead and put your names on the list up there. Thank you very much. And again, Glenn, thank you so much for an absolutely fabulous presentation. It was great.
Okay, everybody on Zoom, I'll be closing the Zoom meeting now. Have a great, see you next month.